Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Terror Zone. Today, we'll be looking at a very special story. I think you're going to like it a lot. Here I have an illustrated classic version of The Christmas Carol, which is an original retelling of the story. Now, there's been a lot of versions out there, many different versions. And now I have dug down deep to find the actual original book of the story, told, well, me self-included. Now, let's look deep of this story and find out all the characters in this particular retelling. The Christmas Carol, as we all know, is about a miser named Scrooge, who is a mean man especially during the Christmas time of year. He makes his worker, Bob Cratchit, work day in, day out. And one day he is visited by three spirits, including his friend Marley, who just died recently, not too long ago. Throughout, he meets countless of different ghosts. The ghost of Christmas past, who is meant to be more of a ghostly-like figure who tells Scrooge of his past life. The ghost of Christmas present is usually a happy-go-lucky guy who has a beard and has different sizes and grows old each time. But he's usually a happy-go-lucky guy and teaches Scrooge about the present and shows Bob Cratchit's family and the struggles they have. All of Tiny Tim, meeting him, starting to care. And then we meet the ghost of the future. Or yet to come. Christmas yet to come. This one is a scary one because he's the most threatening one of all. That shows Scrooge what happened if he doesn't help at all. Towards the end, Scrooge learns his lesson, goes back, and he does things right. That's the story we know about The Christmas Carol. Sure, a lot of things change with some characters looking like some. I'll be looking through the book, comparing to some in some of the movies adaptations that we know and love. Like, for instance, Mickey's Christmas Carol, Muppet Christmas Carol, and more of those. Nothing too crazy or anything too flashy. Just those two in general. I wouldn't be looking at anything too modern like Scrooge or anything like that, because that's not really the thesis of this story. So I'll be looking to more of those adaptations, because since they try to be more closer to the book than most. So let's take a look at this book and compare some things to what we know from the story and the source material we have learned from many different adaptations. So, without further ado, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Here is a cover that I really like a lot. It's Scrooge and Tiny Tim walking together. Very nice, huh? I will show you some of the chapters in this book, in particular. Chapter 1 is Ebenezer Scrooge, teaching us, well, the character. Chapter 2 is visiting to the warehouse. 3 is Marley's ghost. 4 is the ghost of Christmas past. Chapter 5 is the ghost of Christmas present. The 6 is the ghost of Christmas to come. 7 is Christmas Day. 8th is a new boss for Bob. And then Chapter 9 is the new Ebenezer Scrooge. Got the author. I have to read that part. So this is Chapter 1. We don't need to read this one right here. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm just going to read a little bit of this to show. In this picture, it is shown that he is writing the loan to everything that Marley used to own. There's the warehouse. Here you will see, it says here, "Him has pointed nose and stinging cheeks with his red eyes. his thin blue lips, his wary chin, and his harsh, grinning voice. He even kept everything around him cold. The office was as cold as ice and never felt since warmth, not even at Christmas. But even their hour or cold bared, Scrooge neither did people. Nobody ever smiled at him in the streets. Nobody ever asked, "My dear Scrooge, how are you?" Nobody ever offered, Why do you visit us?" No beggars came up to him to please for a travel. No children ever asked him what time it was. No man or woman ever came up to him to ask for directions. Even blind men's dogs led their masters off into doorways and up side streets when they saw Scrooge coming. And did Scrooge care? No, he actually liked this. He went through life wearing all people to keep away from him. See? As you could tell, Charles Dickens has described Scrooge in this book very well, with the fact that, look, the dogs are moving away from him, see? This picture in particular. That's one difference. They never show a blind person in any of the movies. Probably because it's a very old retelling of the story, and anything can happen in these stories. So let's move on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read this whole book. Well, not the whole thing. Just I'm going to show you the similarities and differences each time I'll read through it. And I can compare each. The following. Okay, so we got some familiar faces here. We got Nephew Fred. The Two Guys for the Poor. Own business attend to, and I don't certain myself with other people's business. Now, good afternoon, gentlemen. But, sir, began the gentleman, there is never enough government support for these poor people, and many will die. Bah, humbug, explained Scrooge. Then let them die. We already have enough of surplus population of these weary creatures anyhow. That's not some of what he says in the movies, but he does it very longer in this one. Realizing that they could do nothing to move the old man, two gentlemen left, and Scrooge returned to his work, feeling quite pleased with himself. Meanwhile, the fog darkness had thickened. Outside, the cold had become the more intense, and the streets became from the warehouse. Some workmen had been repairing gas, and line in the road, and has been the fire in the bucket, and groups of grabbed men and boys gathered around it, with their hands dancing fire with good spirits soon. See, there they are, dancing. So, there's this one little section here that's never mentioned either. So there's a lot of details, minor details in the townspeople that's never get explained. That's one thing that kind of keeps a connection in the Disney version, which is with Jim Carrey. There's a lot of scenes with Jim Carrey where he walks around the place interacting with a few people, getting mad at them or whatever. So it's very similar to that kind of interaction in this book here. Now we're going to move on to Marley's Ghost. Here it is. So before he actually meets Marley, of course, in the adaptations we see, he usually shows up on the doorknob. But in this story, he also shows up in the fireplaces too, as you can see through the fireplace layings. And the bell rings a lot, like in the Muppet Christmas Carol version, where it rings a lot. And of course, he goes through the door. This looks very interesting. I'm going to read it real quick. When I was alive, it never walked among when I was alive. It was never left as often when I was alive. Never saw of those creatures I might have helped. So now I'm despised to roam through the world, never rest and never to have peace. For no matter how I missed my life, and no matter how much I regret my sin, there is no way for me to make amends. But you were a good businessman, Jacob, said Scrooge. Business, cried the ghost. My fellow man should have been more business. Charity should have been my business. Mercy, kind madness, and strength should have been my business. And that is time of year I suffered the most, for I remember all the Christmas times I've walked through crowds. A fellow with eyes down even never walked to that heavenly star that led the wise men to the stable so long ago. And again he let out a cry. Scrooge began to tremble violently. So as you can see, he explains to himself how he feels, and actually gives us more information about how his life is as a ghost. As you can see, he kind of walks through the streets as a lonely ghost. Pretty much a ghost, pretty much as a person that can't find his way to heaven. So in a way, Jacob Marley is in a very unstable mind right now, kind of floating about as people go through him, watching his misery. How sad. You accept the second spirit at the following night at the same time, and the third time will come at the last stock of 12. And the next night you will not see me any more, Ebenezer. But for your own sake, remember all that I have told you. The ghost braked away from Scrooge. With each step he took, the window raised himself a little, so that by the time the ghost had reached it, it reached wide open. He unbroken to Scrooge had come him, and then the two were only stepped each other. Marley's ghost held up his hands. As Scrooge stopped, he heard the strange sounds in the air of cries sullying in the walls of regret. The ghost joins in through sounds. He floats in through the window into the dark night. Scrooge rushed to the window and looked out. The air was filled with ghosts, wandering every which way, moaning as float every one who was chains. Scrooge. Yeah, so here you could tell that they took some influence from the Disney version here. So the Disney version took this influence right here where he jumps out of the window, and then Scrooge looks to see all the other ghosts that have chains just like he does, like Marley does. How scary. Jumps out of the window. And look, here are the ghosts floating around. You can see them. Recognize one of those them are greedy and beggar and had known. He was now an old ghost with a huge iron fist. Edged to the ankle, he was floating over a poor woman, standing out of the cold, and infant to his arms. And he was crying painfully because he did not have the power to help her. It was power he didn't have once, but did not use it when he was alive. Soon the spirits floated away, and Scrooge closed the window. He went to the door, through in which the ghosts had entered, and explained carefully. It was still double locked, as he had referenced in his own hands. Here Scrooge was about to say humbug, but got no further than hum. When he stopped, was it because of his conversation with the ghost? Was it because the hour was late? Or was it because he was terrified of his fate? Scrooge did not even bother to take off his dressed gown, but lay down on his bed and asleep instantly. So as you can see, there are some ghosts who are willing to help this woman, but they can't because they're ghosts. They're trying to repair what they did, but they can't. This is really a sad fact here, which is never seen in the actual other versions. I mean, there is a part where Scrooge gets to see the Marley ghost, but other than that, that's pretty much it. Here's the Ghost of Christmas Past, where things get really different. And here he is. As you can see, the Ghost of Christmas Past is very different. I was really excited to see how this guy was going to look in this version. As you can tell, he has a little light crown across his face, has hair with a robe, and some holly. He kind of looks like an angel, a little bit. Or like just a child, pretty much. As you can see, that's what he looks like in this version. In the actual version. In each of the versions we know, a lot of the Christmas Past looks different each way. The most accurate of this one is probably in Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, where he looks pretty much like this. Other than that, there's not really that many that look like him in this version. As you can see, he also has a horn in the back, too. "Remember it?" cried Scrooge earlier. "I could walk blindfolded. Strange that you have forgotten is for so many years." And the ghost, as they walked along the road, Scrooge recognized every gate, every post, every truth. Soon little town appeared to the distance. Its bridge, its church, the winding road. Some points were chanced towards where the boys were beckoning and calling happy as other boys in carts drove to things past, and the ghosts were con to see us. As the merry travelers got closer, Scrooge knew every boy by name, but why was he so overjoyed to see them? Why did his cold eyes glisten with tears, and his heart leaped up as the boys went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them wish each other a Merry Christmas? After all, what was merry about Christmas to Ebenezer Scrooge? So as you can see, he's recognizing all these people, and he's filled with so much joy. How could he? I don't think he was ever brought upon into the story all too much. It's kind of impossible to believe, isn't it? And I think this is the old schoolhouse, of course. And I think this is him reading the Arabian Nights. Let's see. Scrooge sat down upon a bench and went to see his long-forgotten self as a boy. Suddenly, his strange figure appeared out of the side of the schoolroom window. It was a wood of cutter with an axe got a belt. He was leading his donkey over from down the wood. Why, it's Ali Baba, cried Scrooge jealously. Dear old Ali Baba came to visit that boy, sitting there reading. I remember one Christmas when the boy was left here all alone after his classmates have gone home to his holidays, and Ali Baba came to keep him company, and look, there's the genie too. Was this really Ebenezer Scrooge, laughing and crying, excited over friends he had made in his childhood books? Friends who kept him excuse me, company was distant by lies once, and there's a parrot, cried Scrooge. Poor old Robinson Crusoe. How again, after sailing around his island, and there was Friday running towards the cheek. So, as you can see, he read his books to keep him company. That's one thing he never showed in the books all too much. He only imagined his friends. They did show a little bit of it, but not too much. They only imagined. I guess they wanted to keep Scrooge a bit lonely, but here he's not exactly that lonely with these friends of his. They imagined inside his head. Here's him meeting his sister, Fozzie. When all guests had gone, the Fuzzywigs wished the same Merry Christmas to their two patients, and the boys headed up for their beds to back to the room of the rare house full of presents for the Fuzzywigs. All the while, the party since taking place, Scrooge was watching the act of its were part of as happening. He slept in his hands, and the music clicked, and foods nodded happiness and guests when it was the same farewell to Fuzzywigs. "It costs so little," said the ghost, "to make so many people happy." At that party, Fuzzywigs spent a few pounds, 3, 4, perhaps, pounds, 3, 4, perhaps. Do you really think he deserves all the post of the boys held on him? "It isn't that," said Scrooge, speaking more too powerful to make us happy to unhappy to make our work to promise the brighten. No spirit the happiest Fuzzywood gives us as. So they all left. This is Belle, them breaking up here. "Forget a bad dream. May you be happy in the life you have chosen." And she stood and walked away. "Ghost," cried Scrooge, "do not torment me any more. Take me home. Just one more shadow," said the ghost. "No more," cried Scrooge. "No more. I don't want to see any more." But the ghost grasped Scrooge's arm and forced him to glance upon the scene that was appearing before them. They were inside a room, not a large, exciting room, but a comfortable one, with a cheer fire burning. In the hearth next to the fire sat the beautiful girl who looked much like the girl in the last scene. That Scrooge believed that it was the same one until he saw her, Belle, now interacting emotionally, sitting opposite to her daughter. The noise is in his room to find for. Ah. Now in this version, Belle gets married to someone else. And she has a daughter right here. Gosh, that's gotta hurt a lot to Scrooge. Not to mention, in this version, her name is Belle. It changes from many different adaptations. Isabel, just Belle. And this one is just Belle. Bell. Like a sleigh bell, pretty much. There were more children than Scrooge could count, but neither mother or daughter seemed to be bothered about the noise. In the fact, it seemed to be enjoying it, even joining the children's games. Now kicking was heard into the door, and all children rushed towards it, carrying 2 laughing women along when then degraded father, and came home and seen the Christmas presents. Children shouted with the wondering delight, and each gift was opened for long, and afterward the mother and father became happily, as the children played with the gifts. Slowly the herd to the children began to leave the putter to go upstairs to bed. And now Scrooge watched more closely as the father, and with his daughter, leaning lonely on him, and sat down with her and mother at the fireside. And when Scrooge thought how perhaps that beautiful young girl might have been his daughter, might have brought joy to his life, his eyes grew full of his tears. "Spirit," cried Scrooge in a broken voice, Take me away from here. I told you these were shadows of things that were past, said Ghost. They are what they are. I did not make them happen. Take me away, cried Scrooge. I can't bear it. Take me back. Stop hunting me. With that, Scrooge grabbed a cap hanging down the ghost's back, quickly passed it into his head, and hoped by putting out the ghost's light he could make it go away. But though Scrooge passed the cap all the way down the ground over the vision's figures, the light still slowed down. Scrooge felt explained and justly not sooner that had given the cap on Lee's knees when he found himself in his own bedroom. He laid into the bed, fell into heavy sleep. So just like the Disney version, he got too angry and closed him up. I don't think he rockets away, though. Not in this one. But I think that would have been great payback for the Ghost past anyway. Now here comes the present one. As you can see, he's happy and jolly as he is in the other versions. He's showing the Christmas joy all around. Now he's showing Nephew Fred, I believe, here in this version. Bob Cratchit. And I remember this part. The spirit did not relate here old enough for Scrooge to see that here too was the spirit of Christmas. Take hold of my robe, the spirit told Scrooge, and they left the house. And then the more high above the moon, Scrooge looked down and the back horrified where he was going. He cried he saw the only roaring seas below ahead of them, ahead to a reef of the rocks, sailing to the shore, and sailing to here too, lighthouses, keepers sitting to the Merry Christmas celebrating. Again the spirit scrooched above the black and heaving seas, and landed to the deck of his beside and headman and wheel, offering the crew two sides of the cave. So as you can see, he travels a bit more often this one. Just like the past, he grabs onto the robe of the Christmas peasant and kind of flies across into a lighthouse, too. This is probably Nephew Fred right here. That one was Bob Cratchit. I made a mistake on that one. Here's the hang of the party and the guessing game. Yes or no game. Okay, so here's the last beginning. Let's see how this turns out for the Christmas past. However, it was that a while Scrooge did not change it in appreciation. The ghost seemed to grow older and older. Scrooge noticed that this as the night wore on. Are spirits live so short? He asked. My life on earth is very short, said the ghost. It ends tonight. Tonight at midnight, answered the spirit. Listen now, for my time is drawing near. You must beware of ignorance of the greed, for they mean doom to all mankind, unless you and all mankind can change it. The clock began to strike, the hour of the 12. Scrooge looked around him for a spirit, but it had gone. As that last stalk around, Scrooge remembered Marley's presence of the third ghost's arrival at the last stroke of midnight, and lifting his eyes, Scrooge saw before him a phantom dropped and hooded coming towards him. So as you can see, he fades away as he gets older, and there's no children underneath his legs. Thank goodness for that. Unlike the Disney version. That would scare me at my wits. So here's the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and here's what he looks like. Very scary, huh? He's just a hooded guy in a cloak, pretty much. Here's the various scenes that we see in Muppet Christmas Carol, pretty much. Tiny Tim here. The shoekeeper, I was the first to enter the shop. The endless to their second, and the chin-taker helper, the third to tell me Joe isn't the constant of the three of meeting here without planning it. Old friends couldn't have been met better, and places, says Joe, taking the pipe in his mouth. So as you can see, they're kind of talking about Scrooge a little bit here, taking his money and stuff. Taking all his stuff. When old Joe headed to a funeral bag, and many of it, the constant laughed. Ha ha, this is the result of your life, of his life. You see, he frightened as all away him when he was alive, but they're making a profile in him now that he is dead. Ha 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 ha. Spirit, cried Scrooge with a sudden, this unhappy man you're taking about could have been me, for I have been leading just that kind of life, despite but manful heavens. What is this? Scrooge, drawn back to terror, to seeing that change now he is staying in the bed, and the streets a body watch too. So, unlike the other versions, they're not taking Scrooge's stuff, they're taking this other guy's stuff, old Joe, instead, which has died previously before him. I guess he's just showing what could have happened if it was him. In this case, it's old Joe. And you can see he's dead in the bed right there. How dark is that? Oof. Old Joe's a forgotten character within this book, of course, as you can see. I think this is Tiny Tim a little bit here. So as you can see, Bob Cratchit is having one with his son in the coffin here, which is pretty dark to see here. Let's see what happens in this one. Man, was the ghost of Christmas yet to come, cried Scrooge along sometime to the future, into the countryside of Scrooge and Marley warehouse. This is my place of business, said Scrooge. I see the building now. Let me see himself, as I let be the days to come. The spirit stopped to head, pointing away another direction. My warehouse is here, explained Scrooge. Why are you pointing elsewhere? The finger did not move, but continued pointing away. Scrooge rushed to the window of his office and looked in. It still was an office. He said, but not mine. The picture is different, and the figure in the chair is not me. Still the phantom pointed as before. Scrooge took hold of the robe and gone too. Oh, so this is the only scene that took place in the Animaniacs one, where Mr. Plaza's not in his job anymore. So he points to where he is. In the cemetery, basically. And of course, it's Christmas Day. He hugs his curtains. He dances around and says the usual stuff. It's Christmas Day. He touches everybody's hearts on Christmas Day, greeting everyone. I don't say please, interrupts Scrooge. Just come and see me from time to time. When we are nearby, you will. I will, cried the old gentleman, and he really meant it. Thank you, said Scrooge, and the God bless you. Scrooge spent the rest of the Christmas morning in the moorland way away. Had never before he went to church, as you can see. Then walked streets. He watched people hurrying, flowing. He patting children on their heads, taking beggars and looking windows and houses, and took pleasure in seeing people, enjoying the holiday. Everything he did, everything he said, gave him pleasure. He did never dream that anything had brought to him much happiness. In the afternoon, Scrooge tried 2 steps, his nephew's house, but when he reached the door, he walked past it dozens of times. He never went to his nephew's house before. He came to his house. And of course, to surprise Bob, unlike the other versions, he comes to Bob's house after he sees his nephew. But in this one, the next day, he goes to see him instead. And he goes to see him, and then he comes to his family, I believe, towards the end. Here we go, right here. So, I guess he gives him a new job, and he doesn't really come to his house until later on, during the days. You could have assumed that he could have been there. So, there you go. And that is the end of the original Christmas Carol book story. I hope you enjoyed it. And you could take note from this story about what it means about Christmas. And I'll see you next time. Bye on The Terror Zone. This is the real true story of the Christmas Carol. If you guys are big fans, share this video with many others who love this adaptation as well, and see how I compared to most of the other adaptations. So, I rather say, most of the adaptations I have seen stray true to the book. There are some minor changes, and some dark things in the stories too. But all in all, it's a great book to read. I recommend it dearly if you want to know the true version of the Christmas Carol. So, that is it on The Terror Zone.